The Inov-8 F-Fly. Let's talk about them. So in this video, I'm going to discuss my first impressions of this shoe after my first run and workout in them, and I'll discuss some sizing thoughts and just go over my workout in general, so definitely stay tuned for that. But with this model, it is very interesting. It is not like the traditional Inov-8 training shoes that we know right now. So the Inov-8 F-Fly G300, 260 V2, F-Fly 245, the 235 V3, compared to all of those shoes, this shoe is a lot more runnable and it's a little bit more plush. So my first impression with this model is, if you are that individual that has been looking for a shoe for some treadmill running, some interval runs, but then you could also wear for some HIIT and strength work, this might be a really good pick to look into. So what comes to mind with this shoe for me personally is HYROX, the blending of different forms of circuit style training and running. With this model, you have a power flow midsole. However, unlike the other Inov-8 training shoes, it's a lot more plush, and I've put all the shoes together and have squeezed the different densities of the midsoles, and this model has a lot more malleability to it, has a little bit more compression, a little bit more pop. And so that said, if you have been looking for that training shoe that's a bit more runnable but can be stable enough for some strength work, this might be a really good pick to look into. And for my HYROX focused individuals, I would say look into this shoe because I feel like this might be one of the top contenders for that sport. The second first impression that I have with the shoe is I really like the fit of this model. The toe box is wider and more anatomical, so I have the standard fit in this shoe. I think that's the only model right now available in the US at least, and I have plenty of room in the toe box of the shoe. I have an E-width foot and a normal arch. And the midfoot is a little bit more tapered like other Inov-8 shoes, but there's not an aggressive arch here in my opinion to where it's going to turn off most folks. Now, if you have an excessively flat foot, you might want to consider that, but I think for most folks you'll be plenty fine. But I really dig the toe box width in this shoe because it does feel a little bit wider than models like the 260 V2, 245, and even 235 V3. And dare I say the Bear XF 210 V3, which is their older barefoot shoe. I know they have a new one out now and I will have a video on them very soon too. So the second first impression that I have with the shoe is I really like the fit and the 4-foot width that you get with this model for accommodating toe splay. My third first impression with this shoe is I like how it has that sock-like fit, and I like that you have a little bit of a flared heel back here with some beveling. So with the sock-like fit, this model feels very similar in my opinion to the 245 and 235 V3. So if you've ever worn those from Inov-8, they feel very form-fitting to the foot. They never really feel super limiting despite kind of having a slightly lower profile upper. They just feel more sock-like. And so this shoe is very similar with this air mesh upper construction. Now I will say something I'm going to keep an eye on with this model is this mesh up here at the forefoot. I want to see if this is durable long term because I could see this actually being problematic with a ton of stress and friction, but that's going to be something that we're all going to have to test as we all wear this shoe a lot more, put more miles in them, but that is definitely an area I'm keeping an eye on. But regarding the flared out midsole and the heel, why do I like it? Well, when I'm running, especially on a training shoe like this, that does have a slightly lower stack height, it's not gonna have as much pop as a traditional running shoe. I feel like this kind of helps dissipate force and impact and spread that out on my foot. So I will admit, when I start running a little bit slower, I am a classic heel striker with my gait. And this shoe didn't feel super uncomfortable for my first 5K in them, and that was doing a lot of hills, and that's a lot of inclines and declines in my neighborhood here in Austin. And with this beveling here, it just makes for a smoother transition, which is why I feel like this shoe can be a really good hybrid model between running and lifting. So honestly, this is probably gonna be one of my go-to picks for that style of workout very soon once I get more sessions in them. So definitely stay tuned for that. My fourth first impression with this model is I'm really stoked that Inov-8 put the boomerang footbed in this model. So the boomerang footbed and insole is basically this insole here, has this bumpier texture. It provides a nice level of pop, but I also just love the feel of it. I feel like it helps give this shoe a little bit more cushion too. And because this model does have that lower stack height, it is going to be more dense compared to a traditional running shoe. But factors like that with the power flow midsole being more plush, it helps make this shoe a little bit more comfortable. I thought this shoe was gonna still run dense despite it being marketed as more cardio focused, but honestly, it did not feel bad for running on concrete with a faster 5K last night. So I've been super stoked on that with the shoe, and I'm glad they put that feature in this model. My fifth and final first impression that I want to discuss with the shoe in this video is to describe this model's feel regarding where it lands in the context of traditional running shoes and training shoes and more traditional barefoot shoes is somewhere in the middle. And I almost see this as being a really good bridge shoe for somebody who loves training in barefoot shoes, but they do like having some cushion for certain workouts, but they don't want to necessarily go for a running shoe with a super high aggressive stack height. This could be a good model to look into. It almost kind of reminds me of the Topo Athletic ST5. However, this shoe does feel a little bit more elite regarding its construction and intent, whereas the Topo Athletic SD5, it just feels a little bit more like recreational, so to speak. And I know that's just my opinion, but this model does remind me of that shoe in the context of its fit and how it's intended to be used, its stack height, and just its width of its forefoot. So if you do want that betweener kind of model between a barefoot shoe and a more like grandiose running shoe with a wicked high stack height, this could be a good option to look into. Now, regarding the sizing of this model, I think going true to size should be a safe call for most folks. Once again, you do have a wider toe box. I have an E-width foot and a standard arch, and this shoe fits my foot really well. Even if you have a double E-width foot or a slightly wider foot, I don't think you're gonna have issues in this model. I almost feel like because it is a little bit wider for my foot anatomy, I'm gonna keep an eye on this spillover over here because the upper's not super aggressive for lateral stuff. And so that said, I'll have more thoughts on that as I build out my review in the shoe. But when it comes to heel to toe drop and weight, because I know a lot of folks want to know that with this model, the heel to toe drop of this shoe is 4 millimeters. And then for my size 10 model, the weight is 8.7 ounces, which is putting this model on the lighter end for training shoes. But that said, let's dive into my first workouts in this shoe. I wanna go over some thoughts I have in this model when it comes to training. So my first workout in these was actually a 5K done the night before I filmed this workout, and to be quite honest with you, it was after a work day. It was just so beautiful out. I did not feel like bringing my camera to set up. I just wanted to go run and have some fun in these shoes. But we started out today's workout with some sled drags, and that's for knee health. If I had to describe this workout to you, I would call it like a tune-up workout. This isn't necessarily part of my program at the moment, but I'll do workouts like this when I'm feeling a bit beat up, but I just want to go move my body and get some quality work in. We did some single leg RDLs here with support. If you do these, a couple things to think about is to lock that hip down, so don't open up that hip when you're hinging back, and really sink into that glute and use your hamstring as the limiting factor. From there, we did some glute kickbacks because your boy here is trying to build up those buns for the summer. Holla at me if you see these glute max walking around the streets. But I've been loving these just because they're very low intensity. They give me a sick pump and they allow me to kind of focus on what my hips are doing when moving into glute extension. From there, we went into some hamstring rollouts. Now with this variation, the big thing I was focusing on here is that lengthened position and basically controlling my pelvis and my hamstrings to create a nice flexion there to really get the most out of them. I'm still kind of beat up after the deadlift and run and just my training in general, so that has been a staple for me, just getting in some quality hamstring flexion without doing too much loading per se. From there, we did some lower back extensions here, had a 40-pound dumbbell. Big thing here was really driving my glutes through the pad. Now, a variation that I've been playing with that you might want to try out yourself if you find that Copenhagen planks just, they kind of just aren't hitting for you, or you want to change up your stimulus a little bit. Hang off one of your feet here on the edge of a bench or a box like I'm doing, and basically that foot that is in front of the box, I'm driving that heel back into the box. And I have found that this blows my adductors up on the leg that is stabilized on top of that box there. I was adding in some torso rotations here just to get a little bit of passive mobility work, or I guess active mobility work at that. But I feel like that heel driving off, driving that back, it's helped keep my glutes more extended and engaged, and it's been blowing my adductors up. Super fun variation to play around with if you find the Copenhagen isn't hitting for you. All right, guys, that's up this first impressions video of the Inov-8 F-Fly. I'm pretty stoked on this shoe, and that's because it has performed exceptionally well, but it's also very different. And I almost feel like it might be able to fill this box of like a really good hybrid shoe or even HYROX shoe that the market is, to be quite honest, kind of lacking. I know there are some options that work really well in that context, but I feel like as those asks and like more of that hybrid athlete and HYROX athlete continue to grow and expand and get more popular, shoes like this I feel like are going to be a really good thing to have. But I will have more thoughts on this shoe in my full reviews. And so if you want to hold off on buying them for that full review, expect that in the next couple of weeks. I want more sessions of this model before I draw conclusions on durability and their overall stability regarding strength training. But that said, if you have additional questions in the meantime, drop them down below or reach out to me on Instagram. And as always, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.